Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Michael Hyatt.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. So I'd like to first welcome my panelists to join me up here on stage. First is Peter Rudin, analyst for IDC, Server Solutions Enterprise Platform. Thank you, Peter. How are you doing?
Good.
Great. Second is Serge Lucio, VP of Strategy at CA Technologies for our Mainframe business unit. Serge, come on up here. Thank you. And lastly, Hayden Lindsay, who is VP and Distinguished Engineer for IBM DevOps for Enterprise Systems. Thank you, Jabin. Why don't you grab a seat? Okay, so let's go to, that's what we got there on the screen behind us. So thank you all. I thought I'd start this panel by building off the panel keynote discussion from this morning when we heard Mike Gregoire talk about how we need to think about our role in software, not just about optimizing existing technology, kind of describe that as maybe boring and trying to take cost out, but think about how we unlock value through software. And today we're going to talk about how to unlock value in the mainframe and the path to value creation around the mainframe. So I want to start with Peter. IDC's been talking a lot about digital transformation, and recently you've done a study around the connected mainframe and what that means. You can tell folks a little bit about what you found in that study and what are the key learnings around a connected mainframe and how that's a pathway to unlocking value.
Yeah, the study was among mainframe businesses, 9 large businesses in various industries, including banking, healthcare, insurance. And there were 2 components to it really, quantified and qualified. The goal was to find out whether these businesses are, where they are with digital transformation and how they are using the mainframe in that process. What we found is that all these businesses were definitely working on having the mainframe support them with business expansion. They were starting to integrate the mainframe in their overall infrastructure. And they were even starting to look at the mainframe as a part of a larger external ecosystem. We were also seeing that they were getting some real benefits from this. What we said is really what we're seeing here is something that we then called sort of the connected mainframe. And what is a connected mainframe? There are sort of 2 components to that. One is modernization and the other is integration. Modernization is sort of creating the platform on which you're going to do this. And then integration is making it part of the larger ecosystem. And all of that is then intended to lead to business innovation, where you're going to develop new products, you're going to address new markets, you're going to, technology-wise, you're going to be able to do certain digital analytical processes that allow you to get better customer insights, things like that. The steps that are sort of part of these components, modernization are, and all these companies were sort of at different stages with each of these, but they were Java, the companies that are ahead here are using more Java. It's the use of Linux on the mainframe. Again, those that are really starting to work on this are starting to fire up the IFLs, starting to do some co-location. It's web enablement, having functions and data from the mainframe be available via web services, and it is mainframe as a service. Now that is still a difficult one. There's some attempting to do that. I think there's a case study where Walmart actually did that really well, but what we saw with these organizations that they're doing database as a service, they're doing file as a service, things like that, but to have a sort of a billing, self-service provisioning component, they're thinking about it, but the technology is not quite there yet. I believe that there is actually something that COS will do in the future to enable that. So that's the modernization, and the integration part is hybrid cloud. Hybrid cloud is on everybody's mind. These are large businesses. They have had mainframes for years, if not decades. Hybrid cloud for them is a little out there. I think they're a little behind maybe with the general mainframe customer. The biggest concern there is security, but they're working on it. APIs, starting to use APIs, an API economy both internally as well as externally. We have talked to organizations in this study that had like 12,000 internal APIs and others that are saying that their external APIs within sort of external ecosystems are really revenue generating. There are, let me see what else we're talking about. The DevOps and agile development. Most of these companies are doing that. They're making the mainframe part of DevOps. And they're doing agile development with the mainframe. And next-gen application development. That is starting. So next-gen application development is using microservices, runtime, open source runtime frameworks, new languages. It's starting, but a lot of these businesses are still very happy either working with COBOL or working with Java. But it's beginning, and then mobile apps, of course. And mobile apps is pretty common among most of these organizations.
Very good. So modernization, integration, both ways to extend the value of the mainframe versus move away from the mainframe. So Hayden, I wonder if you could comment on what you're seeing in terms of workloads staying on the mainframe. Why would customers be wanting to extend the value of the mainframe? What are some of the use cases you could point to for where this is happening from your experience?
Right, so, I mean, this view of hybrid cloud and leveraging the mainframe in the context of a broader multi-platform, multi-technology environment is the norm. Nope, people typically do not have the luxury of greenfield development. Let's build everything again from scratch. It's also kind of foolish because you have something that works and has served the purpose of the business for years, if not decades. Maybe it just needs a little polishing. Maybe it needs a little refactoring to be applicable in a new context, such as mobile, such as web. And so we're seeing many, many clients do that. You know, as far as workloads and new workloads, we see people consolidating distributed Linux workloads on IFLs or a Linux one box or an IFL on a regular mainframe box, simply for cost advantage and reliability and all that, but also just cost advantage. It takes less human effort, less electricity, less floor space to consolidate that workload versus a data farm on commodity servers. But you know, that's more the Linux, and let's just do this because it makes financial sense.
Yeah.
As far as leveraging what you have, the big thing that we see is what I was talking about previously in the context of a hybrid cloud, or what we would now call hybrid cloud. But some years ago, we would talk about service enabling the back-end systems, these systems that had served a purpose, but maybe they were only accessible by back office people with a green screen interface. Now you want to provide a web interface, or in the client server era, even before we talked SOA, you needed to have a way to connect to these back-end systems. So a lot more of that is happening. I think the realization in the market is that, just like the analyst said around SOA, it's, I think the figure back then was 5 times less expensive to reuse something in a SOA context than to create it from scratch. Why? Because it already works. You've already teased out, you know, quality issues if you had any to begin with. There's, you know, it's secure, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Well, now let's do this, and yet now instead of maybe SOAP, it's a RESTful interface. And mobile, especially. I mean, web drove up workloads quite a bit. Mobile is causing crazy growth in workloads, and at times that in the past maybe that was your downtime because there were no back office people in the office.
Right.
Now people can be doing things on their phone any time of day. So we see a lot of that. That's leveraging what exists, but then we're seeing new development, and be it new languages that we're making available there, new platforms around analytics and technologies around analytics, doing some stuff around blockchain, And so there's a lot of new things, and like Walmart they talked last week at an event where they built a brand new set of services that the distributed guys had tried to build for 8 or 9 months and failed. They did it in 3 weeks. It's now run 21 billion invocations of the service without any downtime, and they ended up being the heroes, even though when they initially proposed it, people were like, mainframe guys are going to do this?
Right.
So that's an unexpected type of new workload where it's not just reusing what exists, but doing new stuff and leveraging the quality of service that you get with the ZBox.
Yeah, so there's 2 core drivers then. Obviously, one is cost and sort of being able to take advantage of the investment you've already made, but now more and more customers are using the connected mainframe to transition to this value generation. Where would you say customers are in that journey, Peter, from your experience? Are they now moving more toward the value side?
They are. They definitely are moving to the value side. I think that a lot of cost has been teased out of the mainframe at this point. I mean, that's just been going on for years and years, and most mainframe shops have gotten really good at it. Now they're seeing opportunity. First of all, the new hardware platform is offering a lot of capabilities that are allowing these customers to start doing some of the things that we say are what a connected mainframe is all about. And they're starting to do it. And I think that to what Hayden said, the cost of not doing that, the cost of leaving the mainframe for the purposes that it traditionally maybe was used for, that is essentially an opportunity cost, right? That you're wasting. The cost of migrating, the cost of getting partially or entirely off that mainframe. From the study we've done, it's not worth it. The businesses we talked to said to us that in essence they did large evaluations, big studies. The ROI simply wasn't there for them.
And so Hayden, with the integration aspect of this and the API enablement of mainframes, are you seeing customers do that more for internal use cases, connecting internal systems, or to what extent is that becoming an open API to connect with external partners and customers in new ways to create value as well?
Right, so we've all probably seen statistics like, I think Expedia makes something like 90% of their revenue by exposing APIs that others use and pay them, a metered rate for the uses. So yes, there are examples of that, and most of those that I have seen tend to be more the born on the web type clients, and not that it isn't totally relevant to do something like that for the back-end system of record applications. In general, you first have to make sure it works. I mean, it's when we were talking about reuse, 10, 15, 20 years ago, you can't claim something is reusable if it's never been reused. Mm-hmm. You probably need to make sure it's reused by a few people, and you might want to keep it, in-house to begin with. And so that's where people tend to be starting.
Yes.
Do it in-house, and then if there's a business model, and you say this is generally useful, just like what Walmart did with this caching service. I was talking to the guy last week, and I said, have you guys thought about, because they're putting the code out in open source to make it available to anybody that wants to use it. It's going to be out there in GitHub, and hey, you can have this code. But I was like, what about actually if somebody just didn't want to take the code and have to maintain it, they wanted to have it run for them. Have you thought about that? And he's like, they've thought about it, they've talked about it, but that's still a few steps in the future. So I think crawl, walk, run.
Yes.
And make sure it actually is reusable, and make sure it's not going to screw up your business focus, because your business focus generally is to run whatever your business is, not so much this other thing, whereas maybe Expedia, they knew from day one they wanted to make money off other people using their services.
Well, so Serge, are you also seeing this shift of investment back to systems of record, systems enablement, and what are some of the examples that you would point to from your exposure?
Yeah, so what's really interesting is, in many ways, this integration between the system of engagement and the system of record has kind of driven new workloads, right? When we look at our customer base, about 2/3 of our customers see their MIPS growing anywhere between the 8 to 12% yearly due to the increased traffic that comes from mobile devices, mobile applications. Think about just people consulting their balance, for instance, on their accounts. And as a result of that, a lot of our customers are trying to manage it, right? So they are trying to manage their cost on the mainframe, which is, pretty much linked to the MIPS. And so a lot of investment, going to the example that Hayden was given around caching, for instance. We have customers who are trying to invest in correlating, doing real-time analytics, for instance, correlating workloads, and trying to predict what is the capacity that they need to provision to be able to reduce their cost in terms of MIPS. So there's definitely a trend in terms of how customers are trying to manage this increase in MIPS. So in some cases, it's going to be doing real-time analytics to do capacity management. In our case, we will see people rewriting parts of their applications to leverage IFLs, which is another pattern. But I think what's been really interesting in the last couple of years is over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of workloads, specifically around analytics, moving to the cloud. Right? People moving data off the mainframe to the cloud to leverage Hadoop and doing a lot of analytics. And what we're seeing now is really a pattern where customers are starting to realize that 70% of their data is on the mainframe, that they can leverage modern techniques, modern DevOps techniques to actually develop on the mainframe, just like they do on a distributed platform, and leverage advances in technologies like Spark and memory on ZOS to actually do big data analytics on the mainframe and not incur the costs of moving data, storing the data outside, not incurring the risks around security. So in many ways, what we see is a lot of investment on the system of record is actually driven by the system of engagement and by the pressures that the system of engagements are creating on the systems of record.
And one thing, Sarah, to your point about this whole ETL cost, not only do you now replicate data and now you might have a governance or security concern, but I've seen an estimate, I don't know if it's accurate, but let's say it's in the ballpark, that 20% of the MIPS are spent ETLing.
Yes.
And so you're not only dealing with stale data versus real-time insight that the analytics could provide if it's where the data sits and where it's in movement and this kind of thing, but you also, this is to the value thing, you're wasting money, doing something that is actually suboptimal.
Well,
I've seen some really amazing business cases where businesses, but also government institutions on mainframes using their IFLs, bringing systems of engagement onto those IFLs, and then creating these environments where systems of engagement and on record, essentially Linux and the ZOS portions, together are creating a whole new user experience. I think the DMV of California did something really interesting there, and with very beneficial, cost-efficient results too.
Right.
Well, we're talking about pathways to value and benefits, and so Peter, in the IDC study, you guys actually quantified some of the return on investment that you can get and some of the realization of value you can have through making your mainframe more connected along these lines. Can you talk a little bit about some of the examples of the case studies you went through and some of the key findings and the benchmarks of what people might expect to as they go through this journey in terms of the value they could realize through some of the areas they might put their energy against?
Yeah, so when we do these studies, we talk to these organizations at length in great detail. We quantify their answers. We ask them to quantify as much as possible. How much did you invest? How much did that cost? How many people do you have working on this? On and on and on and on. I'm glad I don't have to do those interviews, but they're very intense and go very deep. Then we use a set of assumptions we model, and then we come to sort of an overall quantified result for these organizations. Now, remember, these were very large organizations, but what we found was that they were having an additional revenue impact of close to $200 million because of the connected mainframe initiatives that they were taking. That translates into a 5-year ROI of more than 300%. They were also achieving break even within 10 months. So from the point that they made these investments to break even, that was about 10 months. And then their overall cost of operations versus a distributed environment was almost 50% lower. So all these businesses were reporting really significant business impact in terms of numbers.
So, Serge and Hayden, when you hear numbers like that and you think about your own customer interactions, does that resonate with you? Is that similar to the kind of things you're getting from customers talking about their experience bringing the mainframe forward in this modern world?
So, I mean, just an interesting example from a recent customer we've talked to. who's been trying to move a workload off a mainframe. So that workload used to cost them about 100K yearly to operate. And after they moved that workload, it's now costing them about $20 million a year to actually operate that. And it's a combination between the hardware. They used to have 2 headcount to actually manage that workload on the mainframe. They now have about 20 people actually managing that workload off the mainframe. We have tons of examples where customers have been trying to move workloads off the mainframe and didn't have the kind of return on investment that they were expecting. And a lot of these decisions were actually made based on perception of the platform being obsolete. And they range from, well, the platform is inflexible, it's slow, we don't have the skills, we don't have the resource to build on the platform. And I think what we're starting to see is that customers are starting to realize that really they can build workloads for the mainframe, leveraging modern technologies, and really they need to think about what is a fit for purpose of that workload. Yeah. And we know that the platform has certain advantages around I/O intensive workloads, around encryption, around scale, and what we're seeing is really kind of a trend where customers are now starting to rethink what is the posture of their mainframe in their hybrid IT environment, and trying to leverage what they have with the platform.
Just to your point, Sergio, one organization we talked to who had extensively looked at whether they should migrate came up with the number that they would probably have to install 5,000 new servers if they were going to go ahead with that. And then another organization who had done a similar evaluation figured out that they were going to need twice as much staff as they had on the mainframe. So the numbers are actually pretty convincing that it is beneficial to stay on that system and to modernize on it.
Yeah. One thing, I just would like to make one point as the IBM rep up here. We would never assert that every single workload belongs on the mainframe.
Sure.
Just because we're a hammer, you're a nail, no. There are certain workloads that maybe reside there because that's what was available 30 years ago when the system was written. So there are much different options today, and obviously if you want to have the portable UI, it needs to not be green screen. It needs to be on your mobile device. But what we need to do is not have the knee-jerk reaction for people who do not have the awareness of the capabilities that exist in a mainframe environment and the value in the assets that are there.
Yes.
And just say, let's throw the baby out with the bathwater. And there are many, many, many examples. Serge gave one example, Peter gave one, but we've seen many where people do this and we almost can't say anything. It's like, a sibling trying to give advice. They'd rather listen to a stranger in the bar than a sibling or family member. So we don't say anything, and then a few years later, they realize they did not strike the right balance. And so the only thing we suggest, think about the right balance and leverage what you can, but create new also. That's why we're investing in things like Swift and Go and Node and all kinds of things to run on Z, but also they clearly run elsewhere.
Right. And I think we found that these organizations are becoming very mature about this. So it's not an either or anymore, and a lot of barriers are being broken down. It's no longer, there's no platform war anymore. They're talking about, essentially becoming a strategic delivery service as a team, the whole data center as a team. Who does what belongs where, what is the most efficient, what will work best where, what should be together, what doesn't have to be together. All those discussions are, and ultimately these discussions are taking place because it's all about what is the business benefit. That's the first mandate, really.
I'll temper that a little bit. Sure. I think that across a section of our customers, this is very true. But we see also a lot of customers who basically have cultural issues, right? They have a CIO who is Gen X, never saw a mainframe in their lives. And there's a perception that the mainframe is not the right platform to innovate. And so we see tons of examples where people, like yesterday I was talking to a customer, and they were sharing with me that they are exposing encryption as a service from the mainframe the line of business guys are consuming this API without even knowing that's on the mainframe. And if they were even to advertise that this was actually on the mainframe, there would be negative reaction within the organization. And so we see a lot of that. We see a lot of the mainframe guys doing stuff and trying to hide the fact that it's actually the mainframe powering that. Yeah. And so I think that's across kind of the IND organization, very true. But I think we need to bring back the swagger of, yes, the mainframe has a role in the hybrid IT. And we don't have to be ashamed to tell a CIO, well, it's stupid to run that on 5,000 distributed servers.
Yeah. Well, I think you've also made some clear comments there that it's not an all or nothing thing, it's not an either or thing, and every customer is not in the same starting point or has the same endpoint for what getting a connected mainframe means. So perhaps I could just ask each one of you to answer this final question before we close, which is, can you give our audience here just a couple of practical thoughts on how do you get started? If you're out there now and thinking, yes, these are the right things we're talking about here, those are the benefits I want to get, where do I start? What's the sort of crawl, walk, run? Where do I crawl from Hayden to get there? And then we'll come down the line here.
Well, the first thing is get started. I like to say,
starting anywhere is good.
Not against my CA colleagues or anybody else, but my biggest competitor is inertia.
Yes.
Because people are too comfortable where they are, and they're still using ISPF and similar ilk tooling and process. And so we need to change the process, change the culture, modernize the tools, because we do have, across the board in the industry, things that are just as good, just as relevant as on distributed platforms. And the second thing I would say is, when you decide to get started, you can't do it all at once. Okay, there's many examples of clients that have done great things, and they started 8 or 10 years ago. So it's always a journey. And so talk to somebody, bring in some consultants to help. Do an assessment, because every client is different. And so where is your low-hanging fruit? Get some small wins, move on.
Great. Serge, what are your thoughts about where the team can practically get started here?
So I'll get back to kind of the swagger. I think we need to get out of a silo and recognize that IBM, CA are innovating on the mainframe, right? There's a reason for which IBM is putting blockchain on the mainframe, right? Encryption, IO intensive. There are a number of reasons why this digital transformation is going to happen also on the mainframe. And so if I have one recommendation, look around, look at your peers, what they are doing in terms of innovation on the mainframe, and tell your CIO, tell your management that the mainframe is actually a vibrant platform which is relevant, and what are kind of unique characteristics of the mainframe that you can leverage to power the IT and transform your IT environments.
Great. So Peter, we'll finish with you, who also started this conversation by talking directly to 9 customers and understanding their journey.
Right.
What can you learn from their examples and share again with the group here about how to get started here? What are the first practical things to get going toward the journey we're on?
So I think what we saw among these organizations is that several of them had done big evaluations to migrate certain workloads off the mainframe or the entire mainframe. What none of them actually have done is a big evaluation, let's bring in some consultants, what it would take to become, such a connected mainframe, which is interesting, right? If you're going to do this, why not do the other thing? But they haven't. Instead, what they have done is they started somewhere in that circle that we had up there for a while. You see all these elements. All of them started somewhere. They started doing something. And that worked, and then they tried to expand it a little bit. So to what Hayden said, start somewhere. That is really, and start somewhere with a business concept, and then work your way back to what role does the mainframe play in that business concept, because then you are directly talking to the line of business. This works, this is what the mainframe's role is in it, this is why we should do this, why we should expand it. That's what I think would be the takeaway.
Well, I think it's a great graphic because a circle doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end either. So
that's right.
Start somewhere, to Hayden's advice,
yep.
Keep going, and that's the way to really get the unlock of value that we're talking about here. Well, I just want to thank all my panel members today. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. So thank you to Hayden, thank you to Serge, and thank you to Peter. And we hope you guys enjoy the rest of your CA World experience. Thank you all.
Thanks, Michael. Thank you.